Chapter 45. Snow fell and covered the back pasture that year. And because there was snow, you could be sure that Corey would be on his skis. And so I followed reluctantly along. It was one of the few times that Corey didn't warn me about the fence. So I guess I wasn't thinking about it. It was only when I felt the shock, like sticking my finger in a light socket, that I cried, "Help!" I couldn't get up. I was sitting on my ski pole, and my hand was caught in the strap. I tried rolling over, but my skis were crossed. Every movement I made, my coattails hiked up more. I finally got into a position on one knee, but the wire had my ski pinned. Corey stepped gingerly over the fence, trying to get my skis off, but every time he put his hands on the metal bindings, he got shocked too. Finally, he abandoned me and ran to the pump house. In a minute, the current stopped, and Corey returned and untangled me, suggesting I'd better not ski on our hill. I should stick to the mountain, where it was safer. So one day, Corey and I went to the mountain. There wasn't much of a crowd on the chairlift. It was a blustery day, and when Corey and I came to load, the attendant's attention was elsewhere, not assisting us in loading. We stood at attention as the chair approached. Suddenly the wind caught it, swinging it off course and hitting me in the back, knocking us off balance. Corey managed to grab hold of the bar, but before he could catch me, I was swept off the edge of the platform into a deep, narrow crevice alongside the building. My last glimpse of Corey was him dangling from the chair in midair. I was just beginning to appreciate the fact that I was alive when I heard a female voice screaming, and something hit me like a ton of bricks. Another woman had fallen on top of me. The impact hurt me more than my fall, but I couldn't help myself due to the weight upon me. The woman kept thrashing about, trying to untangle herself. It was like being stomped on in a vat of grapes. Finally, rescuers arrived, but the rescue was worse than the initial hit. While they were trying to remove my skis, I knew I had a badly injured ankle. So here I was, back to the familiar routine, seeing Dr. Carlson. He confirmed that I was battered, bruised, and chipped. As he applied a cast to my left ankle, he addressed Corey. "Well, your mother will be perplexed about this." Corey laughed. "Yeah, she was so relieved when I fell off the horse. That not only proved her theory, but also meant that we were free from the curse. It'll be interesting to see how she's going to deal with accident number 4. Dr. Carlson addressed me. "And where was Corey when you needed him most?" Corey explained. "I was about 60 feet over the treetops. And then the lift stopped. The attendant had pulled the switch. I managed to pull myself up into the chair, and then I just had to sit there." I managed to muster up a little humor. "Well, if you loved me, you would have jumped off and come to my rescue." "If I'd jumped off, I'd have been accident number 5. If you'd really loved me, you wouldn't have stopped to think of that." "True." Now instead of me taking care of Mama, she was the one taking care of me. It was humbling to be weighted on hand and foot by my poor mother, who just 9 months earlier had been wasting away in a nursing home. Meanwhile, I lounged on the davenport in the dining room, which was doubling as our living room since ours was still unfinished. Mama took the opportunity to retell the incidents from her childhood, including the heartaches of her father's tragedy, being beaten, robbed, and thrown from a train. The ultimate breakup of her parents' marriage, her marriage to Papa, his death, and her life as a widow. This had been remarkable to her daughters. Instead of languishing in grief, she had taken on the job of handling Papa's estate, sharpened her bookkeeping skills, and got a job in the office of her favorite department store. And of course, she told me the story I'd heard 1,000,000 times or more. The most glorious day of her life, when she had ridden her pony in front of President McKinley's carriage. "What do you think of my getting a motorcycle?" I asked Mama. It was something I had been thinking about for some time since my accident. Mama looked surprised, as if wondering if there weren't enough motorcycles roaring around the valley already, and perhaps I should wait until I got my cast off before I joined them. But she recovered. "If you want a motorcycle, Franny, you should buy one." "It's not so much that I want a motorcycle as that I need one." Mama looked puzzled. I explained, "Nobody likes the chore of getting the mail. It's kind of like taking out the garbage, and if we don't get the mail, we won't get the checks, and without checks the bank account will be overdrawn. We'll have no food on the table, and eventually, we'll all die of malnutrition, right here in America. So you see, I need a motorcycle." Mama agreed. Corey was not as open-minded as Mama. "If you get a motorcycle, you'll fall off and break your other leg." I was horrified. "I don't need a huge Harley-Davidson, I just need a small Honda." As soon as Corey was out the door, Mama said, "Let's go shopping." When Sig and Eric saw my cute little Honda, they asked, "Why didn't you buy a bigger one so we can ride on the trails?" "This isn't for trails. This is to take me to the mailbox. Want to bet? Corey countered. What I hadn't anticipated was that everyone in the family would suddenly want to collect the mail. I put my foot down, the good one, but I faced opposition. The only time I questioned Mama's loyalty to me was when she advocated for one of the kids. One day she suggested I allow Sig to ride the motorcycle down the road, but not up on the trails with the hoodlums. Siggy needs wheels, she said. That was true. After Freya had bequeathed Uncle Jack's car to him, one of his friends convinced him to trade it to him for his sportier model. We were appalled. Not only was the sportier model's body in terrible condition, but the motor was worse. Before Sig took the motorcycle out, I gave him a lengthy list of instructions, the most important being, each time you take it out, fill the tank. It doesn't use much gas, but it does use some. Sure, Mom. In fact, I appoint you as the tank master. Sure, Mom. See that it's always full. Sure, Mom. Eric complained. How come I never get to do? Mama suggested that I should allow Eric to ride it from the house to the end of the driveway and back. I finally agreed. How am I going to know when the gas tank is full? Eric asked. I said, You stick your finger in it. Eric had his usual analytical response, so different from Sig's nonchalance. Which finger? Finally, it seemed that everyone was happy. It was satisfying knowing that I was being well cared for. It was pleasant to have the mail on time. It was a relief not having to worry about the gas tank being filled. It was comforting knowing that if Sig fell short, we had a backup. Eric's finger. One day, I decided to venture out and explore new territory. I took a trip over the hill to Carver and up the Clackamas River Road. Everything went fine, even though I encountered several log trucks. I was wishing that a friend would drive by. They would surely be amazed to find me out so far from home. They'd probably say, Well, darn, ain't that gal got spunk? Eventually, I stopped at a small diner for a cup of coffee. Naturally, getting off my motorcycle and hobbling in on my cast drew attention. I could hear the comments from a couple of log truck drivers at the counter. As I was leaving, one plucked up the courage to ask, How much gas does that thing take? Before I could answer, his smart aleck friend piped up, That thing would probably run off the fumes from a cigarette lighter. Ignoring him, I replied, Well, as I tell my son, who fills the tank for me, it doesn't use much gas, but it does use some. Heavens, if I relied on my kid to fill my gas tank, who knows what godforsaken logging road I'd end up on. Everyone laughed. It's just a matter of discipline, I said smugly, and hobbled out the door. The ride back went perfectly until it began to sprinkle. Then, on the sharp curves just before the valley, where there's a huge ditch on one side and a drop-off to the creek on the other, the dangerous spot we call the most precarious place on the road, the motor began to sputter. I did the only thing I knew how to do. I prayed. Then the engine died. After a moment of hysteria during which a logging truck screeched around the corner, I realized my life depended on me getting out of there. But how? Get off and push. Pushing a motorcycle is quite an insight into Einstein's theory of relativity. Amid the log trucks, my little motorcycle was like a mechanized ant. Hobbling along on my one good leg and using the bike as a crutch, my ant had suddenly become a logging truck. And did I mention it had started to rain harder? I finally made it to my friend Dareth Power's house. She greeted me. Good gracious, Fran, what are you doing out in the rain? I heard you had a motorcycle. You guys sure make a lot of noise. I clarified that I wasn't part of the motorcycle gangs on Scouters Mountain and that my motorcycle made practically no noise. Yeah, I didn't hear any noise when you arrived. I know, that's because... After I explained the circumstances, I used her phone to call Sig. His car was out of order, naturally. So he walked across the valley to Dareth's house with a can of gas. Sig filled the tank. I climbed on and pressed the starter. We were enveloped in a puff of smoke and a series of loud bangs. I saw Dareth's face and realized she would never believe me again. I tried to explain. Honestly, my motorcycle usually makes practically no... But I couldn't even hear my own voice over the racket. When I told Mama how far I had pushed the motorcycle, she said, You're well enough to drive to California.